Welcome to another episode of Fatherhood Voices. Now, I have a very special guest today, and that's Armando Novello. And he's also in the business, not in real estate, but on the loan side, so a very important side. And just through conversations that we had, first started on social media, and then now it led to lunch, and then it eventually led to him coming and being on the show. He has an amazing story of his journey with fatherhood, not only as the struggles he went through as a child, but then also now stepping into fatherhood and raising his children. So, Armando, welcome.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Now, I'm excited to kind of dive deeper into your journey. So, maybe you can share with the audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where they can find you.
Yeah, so my name's Armando Novello. I'm a local loan officer here in LA County. You can find me on Instagram at Armando underscore Novello underscore and YouTube with the same handle.
Nice. Now, something I've noticed as I've dived deeper into your profile over the last couple of weeks is you're doing a lot of stuff on social media. And I noticed there's somebody on there. Is that your son that's going on and sharing different advice?
Yeah, my son and I actually we started this maybe about 2 months ago where he was helping me just record and setting up the mic. And one day I said, "All right, you sit down and we're gonna try one." And he delivered a script really well, so we started to use him. But something that a lot of people don't know is he's actually been recording videos for us since he was 9 years old. So a lot of our clients, like people that have done business with me, know through the process, like there's a video of him as a little kid that I can share with you that from the very beginning, every step of the way, and like, hey, welcome to the mortgage process. This is what to expect, or your loan's going to underwriting. Here's what that means. So every step of the way, our clients would receive an email with a video from him. So he's kind of grown up doing content, but now it's actually being public.
Wow, I love that. So let me ask you a question before we dive into your past. What kind of spurred that at a young age you had him go on and start walking your clients through the loan process?
Once he was in school and there was a play, and the kid that was one of the leads in the play got sick that morning, and they gave him a shot, and he was able to deliver the lines like from the morning till the afternoon. So he's really good at remembering lines and kind of delivering them. So when I saw that, it was maybe 7 or 8 years old when he did that school play. I figured, let's give this a shot, and he's done really well. He does impromptu stuff, and he just plays well with it. He's a little bit older now, so it's easier. But when he was 9, he was really good at it too.
I noticed that you let him drive your classic car not too long ago. I think you did a poll on social media and said, should I let him drive? Now, what kind of car is it?
It's a 1965 Mustang Fastback.
19. Wow. And so you let him drive. How was that experience to have your son, father to son? And, it's one of those classic kind of TV moments that you always, wait for that time when you can teach your son to drive or just experience.
Interestingly enough, my father-in-law has been teaching him how to drive. My father-in-law always asked to do things like that. I don't know, maybe he didn't have the opportunity when he was younger, but we allow it because he's a really good grandpa. So he's been teaching him, and we went to the office one morning, and we took the Mustang, and on the way over, he said, "I think you should let me drive the Mustang." I said, "All right, let's do a poll." Just joking. I was going to let him drive it anyway. But of course, everybody said, yes, let him drive. So on the way home, he got to drive the car.
That is so cool. So now let's dive into your past. So little Armando, growing up, how was life for you as a child, and how did your father show up or not show up in your life?
Yeah. So for the first part of my life, my father was around, kind of around. He was relatively successful, but he was a womanizer, right? Like he would disappear for 2, 3 weeks at a time. We moved around a lot. I never really went to the same school for more than 1 year. And I remember always thinking when I was a kid, maybe like fifth grade, like every year I'm going to lose 2 or 3 friends because we're going to move or they're going to move. And it was interesting because my mom was really good at shielding who he was, right? So she always said, "Oh, he's out of town on business." But we knew that when he was out of town on business, she would cry and then we would end up moving somewhere new or some turbulence would come about. So I never really knew that was happening. I just knew that something was happening, but not exactly what. Like I said, my mom, in her mind, she didn't want us to have, or me at that point, my brother wasn't around then, she didn't want me to have the idea that my dad was who he was, right? So I always thought he was perfect, which is interesting. And when I was in fourth grade, it just happened to be that he decided his time with us was up, and he moved away. I didn't see him again since I was from the time I was 9 till the time I was 17, right before he passed away. And we knew he got sick, so my mom took us to see him, and I think maybe a month or two later is when he passed. So it was interesting because we were relatively successful, or he was at least, like, financially, and we lived a pretty good life. And then all of a sudden that ended, where we ended up like leaving the house we lived in, all our stuff. God knows what happened to it, like my bicycle, my clothes, and we just ended up staying with my with my grandmother and my grandparent and my grandfather for the rest of the time then. So it was kind of a shock to go from where you kind of have everything to we couldn't even afford to buy a pizza, and that's a story that I remember, like, wow, just once us wanting a pizza and my mom saying, I don't, the $5 for a Little Caesars pizza. So that was a big shock, and I think that led to a lot of the hangups I had with money that, most of us get. And my brother was very young at that point, so it also made me kind of grow up because my brother's 9 years younger than I am. So I ended up taking care of him a lot while my mom kind of got it together and went back to work and things like that. It was an interesting childhood, if you will.
Let me ask you a question because I can relate to um, your mom shielding or protecting your dad from you guys as far as, this image, because I know my wife would always protect the image with my kids when I was out and wasn't present and maybe I was doing things I shouldn't be doing. Um, Looking back now, little Armando, do you think that hindered your growth or do you think that kind of made it easier? Because I struggle with I've recently just had a conversation with someone about this. And is it okay for your mother or significant other to protect the identity or the kind of facade of the father, even though they're not showing up or being present?
I've thought about this a lot through some of the work that I've done, and I think that it could go both ways. But I think for me is I would have almost preferred to know that my dad was not a good guy, right? Because in my opinion, or in my mind, he was perfect, right? So if dad is perfect and then all of a sudden dad leaves us, why are we not good enough for him to be with us, right? So it gave me those hangups.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful. So your message is little Armando to parents that are maybe going through this right now. Maybe they're shielding, the father who's not the best. It's probably to really sit with it because it may not be in the child's best interest.
That would be my opinion, and I
Yeah.
could be wrong, but that's how I perceive it. And I think a lot of times people do that, right? Like there's two ways, and I've shared this before. Women can, in the society that we live in, they can either teach their kids to hate their father, and a lot of women certainly do, or they can do what my mother did, and they shield it. So I think there's got to be a median or some balance there, where it might be a little bit more healthy, if you will.
So not having your dad in your life must have been hard.
Yes. To me, when you're 9 years old, a lot of times your dad is your world, right? Like he's it. He's like he's it. He's everything. So having him all of a sudden just not be there. And then a few years later, of course, maybe I was 14 or 15, we actually learned that he had another family, he had another child. And I think that hang up just stayed with me because we were still struggling financially. So to know that somewhere someone is not struggling financially, where we're completely broke, I think that created a lot of the money hangups that I had for a big part of my life.
Now, making a choice to not be in your father. Now, he didn't want to be in your lives, but did you ever kind of explore the opportunity of, well, I want to reach out to him or, and just get answers? Or did you just kind of just dismiss it as,
So for a little while, maybe for like the first 6, 7 months, we were talking to him. He would call us Tuesdays at 3. And one day the call didn't come. and he moved to Mexico when he left. One day the call didn't come, and then the next week it came. It was just kind of sporadic, and then we just stopped hearing from him. And maybe I was a little bit younger than that, maybe like 12 years old. And my brother never really got to know our father at all. So when those calls stopped, I just kind of became angry, like I don't need him. I'm going to prove to him that I don't need him. And, a lot of things like that. The things that normal teenagers do, rebel. I'm healing from it, but I'm still very resentful to my mother, which is interesting, because everything she did was to try to make it better for us, but I didn't see it that way, and so that's something that I'm still kind of dealing with.
Wow. And so you're angry, and did you have communication with your father's relatives, grandmother, grandfather, aunts, uncles?
No, nobody. I
Nobody.
never met my grandfather, his
Okay.
side. One of our aunts that lives in Mexico still, now she kind of communicates with us through Facebook a little bit, but not really any sort of relationship.
Okay, so it was just cold turkey from the time he left. There was no more communication.
Correct.
And did you participate in sports as a young child going into junior high school, into high school?
No, we were really just kind of in survival mode. My mom worked really hard to, to kind of make it, and she did a great job, but we didn't really have like time or money to participate in any sports. Or so while my friends played baseball, I remember visiting one of my friends at a baseball game once, but we didn't really have the opportunity. I didn't. My brother, we got older, he did, but I didn't have any of those opportunities. It was more like kind of stay home because mom's working, trying to make ends meet,
What area did you grow up in?
I grew up in the East LA area.
In East LA here.
Yeah.
Okay. Very familiar area. Wow. And what about now going into high schools? Your dad hasn't been a part of your life and missed out on a lot of opportunities. How does that show up for you?
Well, I think in high school, where my hangups really shifted to were just like the financial, the lack in financial stability, because we were just barely making it, right? So I didn't have a lot of the opportunities that a lot of our friends had. At that point, when I went to high school, we moved to West Covina, but my mom she worked hard. She bought her first house, but she was just making it. So I didn't have the financial stability, I think, that would have made it easier. So I had a lot of the hangups with the money, and until recently, I maybe the last few years as I started doing this work, I started to see why I had that and started to shift away from it.
Now, how old were you when you became a father?
23.
Okay, so you were young.
Yeah, 20.
Okay, so before I transition out of your past, are there any moments that you remember growing up that really stand out, that were just kind of shifted the dynamics of who you are, or just the direction your life was going to go in?
Yeah, and I shared this on a different show that I was on, but very shortly after our father left us, we moved in with our grandparents, and behind there was like a 2-unit property. One of my uncles lived there with his kids, and one day we were just kind of teasing my cousin, who's a little bit younger than us, just a friend and I, just kids being kids. Sometimes you don't know what you're doing. And my uncle came to me, like very serious, said, "My kids will always be better than you because they have a mother and a father." So, and that just like, man, it was like a light switch, and my ego just really took a offense to it. And I think from there on, like, it was always my goal to be better than them, which is weird, right? But it was just a hang up that I had for a very long time. I'm going to be better than your kids, and better than you was always what I said. And it was mostly a financial thing. I think that's how I was taught. Like, I remember a story that I'll share with you. Once my dad left, and this happened a number of times, but I remember one in particular. He went on one of his business trips, and a couple weeks later, I remember him picking me up and taking me to the Montebello Mall. And in the Montebello Mall, there used to be a toy store, right? But the way my dad showed love was by buying us things. So I remember coming back and just having all these toys that he bought me. And it was weird because that's that's how he kind of apologized and showed that he was there for us, is just by spending money. So I always thought that the way that I prove to people that I'm better is by spending money. And even still today, like, I show love by buying things for people, which is really, I guess it's a hang up from the parents, right?
Now, this uncle that created this, embedded this trauma in you as a young child, do you still speak to him?
No, he passed away a few years ago. Yeah, and I don't blame him one bit, right? I think that people do what they believe is best, and in his mind, he was standing up for his kid, and I think that I wouldn't use the same words, but if someone was teasing one of my kids, I would want to defend them in some way and cause a little bit of hurt to whoever is causing hurt to my kids.
Did you ever have the conversation with them as an adult, or kind of bring up that memory or that moment, or you just kind of left it buried in the past?
No, I never brought it up, but I'll tell you what I did do, because my ego was out of control, is anytime I would buy something expensive, I would rub it in his face. I would go buy a new car and drive it straight to his house to show him. So yeah, I wouldn't do that today, but I did that more than once.
So you're 23 years old and you become a father. How's life for you as a young father now, trying to maneuver how to now father?
Well, I was relatively young. I was still in school when I was married. My wife and I got married very early, because that's what society tells us to do. So we got married very young. Still married to her. I love her. She was my best friend, love of my life. But we got married very early. We were both still in college. So we kind of completed college while we were married. My son was born maybe a month after my college graduation. So I was extremely, I was new, and I didn't really know what to do, but I kind of parented him the same way that I grew up being parented, right? I showed love with money and buying things, and it's crazy because my kids don't have those hangups. So when I buy them things, it's not a big deal to them, you know? And I've always thought, like, man, they don't appreciate these things. Like, I bought them a quad, like a little 4-wheeler, and they were like, oh, that's cool. And then they went back and kept doing what they were doing. I'm like, wait, like, I wish I would have had this when I was your age. So they don't have those same hangups because they don't have that same trauma that I had with the finances. And I've always tried to kind of embed what I thought would be the right way to live to them. And it's cool because now as they're getting older and they have their own personalities, and I'm not perfect by any means, so I'm sure that I've caused both of them some trauma that they'll be healing from someday. But it's interesting to see how they've kind of evolved so different than what I would have expected.
So both boys?
Both boys, yeah.
Okay, how old are they?
They're 16 and 14 now.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So I had them pretty close together.
Pretty close together, yeah.
Okay. So what are some moments that you can remember? I know we had a conversation about sports, in particular jiu-jitsu, and I'd like you to share that story because it's a profound story about parents just really pushing their kids to do the best, and how sometimes that can work against parents,
Yeah. Well, a couple of stories. My oldest, he played t-ball when he was maybe 4 years old, and he's a little nerdy, but he's got good athletic ability, which is interesting. And I remember he was actually good at it, but he had no interest. So the ball would go by and he'd be kicking the dirt and just like look at the ball and be like, dude, what the hell? Go get the ball. Right? So I remember taking him home, and of course, this is what I always do. I have to go all out. Right? So we went to Big Five and we bought like a bucket of balls and a tee, and I took him to the backyard. Like, all right, you're gonna hit this ball 100 times. Because that's what the coaches tell us, right? Like, Tiger Woods missed this shot and he goes and hits that ball 100 times. I'm thinking my 4-year-old is going to hit this ball 100 times.
Wow.
And I would be there like yelling at him, like, dude, hit it. And you got to do it. And come on, and try harder. And I just burned him out.
Wow.
And that season ended and he never played any sports again. And at the same time, we took on a Brazilian jiu-jitsu school at one point, where my family kind of bought it and we ran it. So both of them were really good at jiu-jitsu because they were training 3-4 hours a day. My little one specifically was he's still pretty good, but we burned them out as well. I mean, I did the private lessons for them. I had extra coaches. They were training with the little kids, the teenagers, and sometimes even the adults because I wanted them to be the best, right? And we'd go to a tournament. I remember one time we went to a tournament. I pushed my little one so much, he just started crying and he just froze. And then after that, it was just like they didn't want to compete anymore. So I think that a lot of parents do that, right? Like we want to live through our kids. Like I didn't have the opportunities, so you should be it. And it wasn't until recently where both of my little ones, well, my little one is now in sports, but I don't push him. I just let him be. My oldest, about a month ago, signed up for an MMA class, which I was super thrilled when he said, I want to sign up for an MMA class. So I took him to this class, and I walked in, and it is like the least competitive MMA class you can find, right? I don't know what he Googled or how he found it, one of his friends or something. But it is the least competitive. Like nobody there is winning any competitions or even entering competitions, but they're all having fun. So when I took him there, I sat there, my wife and I took him together, and we watched the first class. And I said, there's no way, like he needs to go to a real school. And she reminded me, like, hey, let him enjoy it. He's doing this for fun, not for competition. And even walking out of there, I asked him, like, hey, if you ever want to switch to a more competitive school, I would support it. And he's been very happy there. He's been there a month and a half, and he's having a great time. So I see it now as he's going there as if he was going to play baseball or something, right? Where he's probably not going to compete, but he's just out there being active and having a good time. So that's something that I've healed from a little here and there, so I don't push them as much as I used to.
So definitely, I want you to reinforce those key takeaways that you just shared, the ones that just resonate with you the most. So, and I'll start it off. Number one, just let your son just have fun and not push him. So that's important. So for parents out there because there's a lot of parents out there that are trying to live their dreams through their children and are pushing them to a point where the kids just walk away. So one was let them be, just let them have fun. If you can drive those key points again, just kind of recap them, because I think this is an important moment that other parents need to hear that are really pushing the kids, and it's just not fun anymore.
Yeah, there's a saying that says your father is the only man that truly wants you to be better than he is, right? And I think sometimes in the world that we live in, like we take that to the extreme. And sometimes it's just about them having fun, right? Like neither one of my kids is going to be a professional baseball player, and that's okay. But I think me pushing them so much and wanting them to do so much better actually had the opposite effect. And we see that very often. Is that kind of what you were?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, powerful. Now, you pushing your kids, how did that impact your relationship with your wife? Was she like right there with you pushing, or was she kind of going the opposite direction? Like, hey,
My wife is great. She's a very good wife. So she often just let me be, and I think today now, just because we both kind of healed a little bit from a lot of my issues, she's a little bit more vocal, and I appreciate it, because now she'll step in and say, hey, I don't think that's a good idea. And it was maybe because before I wasn't open to her feedback, and she probably felt like it was going to turn into a fight or a battle or something. But so I think that's how it was. It was before she would choose her battles and kind of let me be.
You bring up a very powerful point, because there's a lot of women in relationships that haven't found their voice. And they avoid confrontation, so they just sit in silence. And even sometimes when fathers are really damaging their children. Now, this wasn't to the extreme, but when you reflect back on before you started your journey with, healing and so forth, is there anything she could have done to have kind of gotten you to back off from the kids a little bit? Or were you just in a point where it was better that she just lived in silence?
Sadly, and I say this with all humility, is it was probably not, I was not in a place where I would have taken the feedback. Yeah.
So let's dive into a little bit of your healing journey. So give us a little bit of a perspective on that. So
Yeah. Well, There was a gentleman that you and I both know, Danny. He started to talk to me about part of his process and things that have helped him. And really cool thing is I knew him before and after his kind of starting with plant medicine. And I remember the first time my brother, we were in the office and he said, "Oh, I'm going to go try ayahuasca." And all I said to him was like, "You're stupid." And he just walked away, and then as I started to do some work with Danny, I got intrigued. And man, it was life-changing for me. Like all the things that you didn't want to see before, you were kind of forced to see, and it was great. And definitely, I by no means do I feel like I'm perfect. Like I definitely still need a lot of work, and I'm still healing. But I think seeing that for the first time and understanding that it's not all perfect the way you might think you are is the most amazing thing that anyone can experience.
Now, you've sat with ayahuasca how many times?
I've sat with ayahuasca 14 times.
14 times. Okay. And you're still on your journey towards healing.
I am.
So it's not just go drink the medicine and I'm healed.
I wish it'd be nicer.
So being that you've now became an avid student of the medicine on your journey to healing, how did your father show up for you in journey?
Man. So I'll tell you, my very first journey was not with ayahuasca, it was with psilocybin. And during that journey, I remember I was so resentful towards him. And I was sitting in front of him, right? And I asked him, like, why wasn't I good enough? And I asked, why wasn't I good enough? And I can see him, and it was crazy. Like, I can see, like, if he's standing right in front of me. And he said, "No, it's not about you. What I've done has nothing to do with you. The mistakes that I've made have nothing to do." And man, I just cried an hour. And it was almost like I was able to forgive him in that instant. Like, all the hate, the resentment, it just kind of went away. Isn't that crazy? And I think that's when, like, the first time that I actually reached out to his sister, who was, just like, "Hi, I hope you're doing okay," type of thing. But it opened up the communication,
You sparked a memory here. So in that moment, you just felt like forgiveness was something you had to do. And he was still alive at the time?
No, he
Okay.
passed away when I was 17.
He'd passed away. Okay. So you saw him a month before he passed away?
Correct.
You and your brother, but you had more of the memory of him.
Correct.
What did that look like? Did you go to Mexico to see him or was he here?
We went to Mexico to see him. He was, I think he had finished chemotherapy the night before. So when we went to see him, he was kind of lying in bed, not doing well. And it was very superficial, if you will. It was like, "We're here to see you." We kind of knew that he wasn't doing well, but it was very superficial, almost like, "Okay, cool. We came here to check it off the box." And, I appreciate my mom for sending us,
But you didn't get any answers. You weren't able to have those deep conversations that...
He was literally living at his new family's house, right? Like his new girlfriend left so that we can come and see him. So it was awkward. There was no answers or no questions really. It was more like, "We're here to see you because you're going to die."
In retrospect, now looking back that you're an adult and looking back on that experience, is there anything you wish you could have asked him or any closure?
Not anymore. I think that through the process of working with plant medicine, I've learned that through the process of working with plant medicine, I've kind of just figured that I'm in control of that, right? It's not really him. It's me and how I react to it. And it had, again, what he did had nothing to do with me. It was just his part of it, like his journey,
So in your first journey, you felt like you had to forgive him. Did you forgive him, or has it been a work in process?
I think I came complete with it, but there's still some pain there, right? I don't think that any that just vanishes. I think that it opens up the door for forgiveness, but walking through it is a process. It's not like walking through a hallway rather than walking through the door. But I am much more complete with that, and I don't have the hatred or the resentment anymore.
What kind of other revelations came in your journey that helped you to adapt to uh, showing up as a father?
Well, who I was being with my kids. One thing that we do, my oldest boy, is he reads a lot. Because he reads a lot, he's got a really good vocabulary, and he's got a very high IQ. So forever we've kind of drilled on him that he's very smart. And what a lot of people don't realize is when you tell your kids that they're smart, it diminishes their effort. So
Mm.
sometimes they'll stop giving the effort because they believe they're intelligent. You follow? So instead, we should praise not the intelligence, but we should praise the effort that they put into things. That's going to keep them going that way.
Wow.
So my son is brilliant, but sometimes he lacks effort. And I got that in my very first ayahuasca sit. Is we have to talk to them differently. Where my little one, we always told him, well, you're the athlete, because he was really good at jujitsu. So we always pushed that side of it. And now my little one often believes that he's not intelligent, that he's just good at sports.
Well,
So it's crazy that we saw Jesse Itzler recently, and he says the words you speak matter. And it's so amazing. The words we speak to our kids, even while we're trying to uplift them, can cause a little bit of trauma there.
wow. That is powerful words of advice. Powerful. It's funny how just a shift in how we speak to our children and just that small shift, still getting the same message across, can have drastic positive or negative consequences. So definitely something that I'm gonna take with me. I'm sure other people are on how we show up and communicate with our kids, especially when it comes to, oh, you're smart, or oh, you're just athletic. Because I'm sure as siblings it can create that little bit of rivalry between each other, because you have, no two children are the same, but then one feels not as competent maybe on the smarts level, education, versus athletic and so forth. So, wow, powerful. What else came up in your journey?
Um, just who I was being with my wife, not really giving her a voice. We worked together, and oftentimes it was we're doing it this way because I've always done it this way. So my relationship with her has improved. Probably that's probably the biggest thing that I've seen. Just who I was being towards her and how I was treating her was not fair to her. She didn't have a voice. She didn't have any input. It was just kind of you got to go along with what we're doing, and it's crazy because as soon as that shifted, our business started to grow. Everything is, flowing. I kind of gave up control of a whole bunch of things that she never had control of. Where, like, now I don't even have a login to my bank account. She just kind of handles everything, but it works so much better because now I focus on what I'm supposed to be doing. She handles that, and she's got really good input. Like she's super smart. Great ideas.
It's funny what can happen when you finally release control and allow other people to step into their power. How a business can thrive, not only business, but how a family can thrive.
Yeah.
When it's the power of two versus one, just my way or the highway. But now we're seeking input, being okay to know our way may not be the only way or the right way.
Yeah. I had a big hang up with financially, right? So for a long time, I had to have like the nicest car, have, an expensive watch. And for me, it was very important for people to see that. Just for a long time, that was what my life was about. And I think sometimes the coaches that we hire in our business play into that. People they put on stage and are the people that are driving the fancy cars or doing things like that. One of the coaches that I worked with would praise a gentleman who wore a watch that was $300,000. And it was crazy. Like, that was the goal, is I'm going to have that one day. I want more. And I think when that happens, it teaches us not to be content, right? If you're always chasing, you're never appreciating. So I think one of those biggest things from plant medicine was, look how great your life is. And you don't need all of those things to prove to anyone. Like, it's perfect already. I think does that answer your question?
Absolutely, absolutely. I know one of the things in my journey with plant medicine is I was able to purge out money because I was the same way. I always wanted the nicer things, the flashy car. And it was just, and especially being in the business that we're in the whole real estate and mortgage industry, it's just really a bunch of bullshit and smoke and mirrors and everybody trying to impress each other when at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter, one of the things you shared is just you're hanging with money and so forth and just, growing and having a mom that struggled to provide for you guys. And then you going into a business that, of course, where money's unlimited, you can make as much money as you want, depending on how hard you work or smart you work, So how did that show up for you? So you were, into the materialistic things and wanted to be flashy but it took plant medicine to finally have you come to that realization? Or were you already starting the path of realizing, hey, this is just stuff?
No, I think the plant medicine was a big realization that it wasn't necessary, right? I think once I realized, like, for me, it was trying to prove to the world that, because I had this sense of I'm not good enough, because in my mind, I always felt my dad left us and he's got another family. Why are they good enough and I am not, right? Because I was, like, as a kid, I was very close to my father, not close to my mother at all, right? So I was a kid it was he and I, So I always felt like, what did I do to cause him to not want us, right? And again, the way that I was taught to show love was by material things. That's what my father did. So I had to prove to the world that I was good enough. I had to prove to my uncle that I was better than him and better than his kids. So, and then, yeah, that was planted, and then the industry that we're in kind of, it grows. And that's just how it is, man. It's sad that in that world, but it is.
It's something in our culture, especially the deep-rooted Hispanic culture, is a lot of fathers have multiple families. They have a family here in the United States, and then they have one in Mexico. And that's something that children have battled with, especially as you transition into, being a first generation, you're transitioning into trying to figure out how things work here, and then your kids come into the picture, and then you're second generation, and then you're trying to shield them from, that trauma and so forth. But that's actually a bigger problem than I even realized up until I just started to dive deeper and peeling the layers. Or maybe I've always known, but I just kind of chose to close my eyes to it. If I didn't acknowledge it, then it really didn't exist. Now in having conversations, that's the norm in a lot of families, especially when their parents come from Mexico.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you think you could have done to stop your father from leaving? Or because I see you were very close to him, or do you think it was just his journey and it was just
his journey? For a long time, I did kind of blame myself, and I probably thought of that question hundreds of times as a kid. But I realize now, like, understanding everything that it was, like, I once called my mom after a journey and just asked her to give us a breakdown, because, like I said, I don't remember going to the same school for more than a year. Like, I never started a school year and ended the school year in the same school. I always joke and say our stability started when my father left, because that's when I finally got to go to school for 4 years. I went to high school, the same high school, for 4 years. But so I always kind of blamed myself, and until I sat with my mom one day. Actually, we just talked on the phone, and I asked her, like, tell me what happened. Like, I went to this school, and then I went to this school, and I just remember the school. And she told me, well, your father left and was dating this lady. Or he was dating this lady that he worked with at a car dealership, or he worked with it. And he ended up, the last gal he left with and ended up having a child with was his best friend's wife. And he and the best friend grew up together, like, from the time they were kids. So she worked for him. She was his receptionist, and they just ended up hooking up, and that's who he ended up with for the rest of his life. So I don't blame myself, and not anymore. But as a child, I did always think, well, what could I have done how could I have been better? You know?
How's your relationship with your mom these days?
It's not, we clash a lot, and I think there's a lot of resentment from both sides. So it's not a great relationship, to be honest. There's a lot of clash there. She, my mom was very feminine when my father was around, and just very much went into her masculine, as most women do when that happens to them. And I didn't respond well to it, and she tried her best, and I don't think any parent ever does anything to purposely cause any harm to their kids. But I think a lot of things that she did just didn't sit well with me, and still to this day there's some work that needs to be done.
And you guys are still on that path towards healing?
Yes.
And any other thoughts or stories, incidents you want to share that helped to shape your life?
Is there anything that you'd like me to share?
Curious what got you into the mortgage industry. So I know it was that scarcity, I'm going to call it scarcity mindset of growing up with not having the means. How did you now follow that path from scarcity mindset to now going into an industry that was just like totally the opposite?
Yeah, I actually started working as an assistant to a mortgage gal my mom introduced me to when I was in college. So I went to college at UCLA, and I got a job. Really, it was great. It was amazing. Quarter-mile away from the campus, to where I can park at the office and walk to school. So I worked there for a couple of years, and then I ended up going on my own, because primarily greed, right? I saw how much money she was making, and I said, forget this school thing, But it was exactly that. I worked in the mortgage business all through college. I actually bought my first house before I graduated college.
And your clientele, tell me about your clients. What type of clients do you go after?
Well, today it's a different market, right? So for a long time, my clients were the first-time buyers. They were a lot of immigrants, Spanish speakers. In the market that we're in, it's not extremely conducive, just because the incomes they haven't caught up to the prices and the monthly payments. So most of what we do right now are move up buyers, people that are selling one and buying another one.
And then you branched off and then opened your own office?
I started with a mortgage broker, and I worked there until 2007. And then I joined the mortgage banking side, which I prefer personally. There's a big brokers and bankers. I like the banker side better. I like to have the control. And I mean, this company that I'm with, I've been there 8 years. So yeah, it's pretty good. I like stability now, where before I was very unstable. And that's a thing too, like, for a long time. This is part of, I guess, moving so much, is I'm really good at building new relationships, but they're very superficial. And I think plant medicine has helped me with that a lot. Is I would make relationships very quickly, right? Because that's what I did when I was a kid. I had to adapt and make friends at the new school. But then I would leave in 3-4 months. So those friends, whatever time it was, so those friends were no longer relevant. So I got really good at making very superficial relationships, but not great long-term relationships, if you will. And that kind of showed up in my business, because for a while I was almost switching companies every year. And yeah, it's weird, right? Like it all carries.
So it's safe to say that from your upbringing, it will definitely show up into adulthood, and it shows up in everything that you do, not only personal, but also in business.
Yeah, 100%.
Wow. How's your relationship with your kids?
It's much better today. I think now that I kind of accept them and we spend a lot of time together every day at 5:30. I have a standing meeting with my oldest son, and we hang out, and now he goes to his MMA class afterwards. My little one will with my oldest, we record every Saturday. So we go in and shoot some content, and he's my video guy, and now he's recording stuff himself too. So my oldest and I are very tight right now. My youngest is really busy he plays football, so he's gone pretty much all day. So I really try to make time for them as a priority, right? There's a gentleman that came to one of our masterminds that says, for most of us, our business gets the best of us and our family gets the rest of us. We have to switch that, where my family gets the best of me and my business gets the rest of me. That wasn't my quote, but I liked it.
That's freaking powerful. It's powerful. And so with your kids now, do you show up to the games?
Yeah, I haven't missed I missed one game, but he wasn't playing that game.
Okay.
So I go to every game if he's playing. I don't show up to watch other kids play. But if my son's going to play, I will show up.
Why do you show up?
Well, for support. I want him to know that it's important for me to be there. That the business is no longer a priority. Even if he gets one snap on the football field, I want to be there for that. And I'll try to record it on my phone so that, I can show him, like, look, this is what you did or whatever. And he likes to watch it as well.
Not what you did wrong, right?
No.
Okay.
And what's crazy is he has not had any errors, so it's not even, I think that if you're looking for something wrong, you're always going to find it. But if you're looking for it just being, then it just is. Right?
Now, what's going to happen in that moment when you do catch an error? What are you going to do?
I would just show the video to him and let him decide if it's an error. Right. Okay. There was one time when I think he ran the opposite way. And then when he came back, he said, oh, I didn't notice this guy was there and I ran the opposite way. But he said, I know what I did and I'm going to fix it. So it was, all I said was, all right, that's cool. But that's one thing that I never really did before. I never told them I was proud of them for a long time. And now no matter what they do, like, we are proud of them, right? Like, it's crazy, but even when they're not perfect, we're always proud of our kids.
Do you show affection to your kids?
Oh, yeah. I'm very, very much affectionate to both of them. Probably annoying to them now as they get older, right?
You tell them you love them?
I do, and I hug them every day, at least once. So yeah, my little one is more like, dude, go away. Oldest kind of just takes it, but yeah.
Don't stop hugging.
No, I'm not.
Because once you do, then it's real hard to get that back. That the hard way from hugging and kissing on my girls and them pushing me away because it wasn't cool or their friends saw and trying to recapture. I was never able to recapture it back. So the one regret that I do have as a father is listening to them. Should have continued the affection whether they wanted it or not. So, well, no, thank you. This was a beautiful episode. And in being able to just share your struggles growing up with a dad, then without a dad, how impacted you, how you show for your children, and how life is, from this point forward.
It's a journey.
So it's a journey, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.